Greetings, Shadow Era. Welcome to the latest episode of Shadow Era Radio, the official podcast of Woven Studios. We've got some exciting developments to share with you in this episode. We've the official tournament season kicking off, more spoilers have come out, and all kinds of listener questions we've got this week. So let's just go ahead and introduce the design team members we have on today so we can dive right into all the awesomeness we have to share with you. On with us today, we have Kevin, also known as Nacho Cheese on the forums.
Olas.
We have Gondorian, also known as GDC on the forums.
What Good job.
We have Lewis, also known as Soothslayer on the forums.
What's up, everybody?
We have Trevor, also known as Mojumbo on the forums.
You.
And someone who couldn't be with us today, Nick, also known as Orange Hat Guy, asked me to say Banana Boom on his behalf.
Go on then, say it.
Banana
Okay.
Boom!
Banana boom.
Banana Boom.
Banana boom.
Banana boom.
We should name this episode Banana Boom just on his behalf now.
I just want to say, I've never noticed this before. Lewis, if I were to just mispronounce your name a little bit, it'd be Soufflair.
I'm okay with that, actually.
Tumbleweed.
Soothflayer?
Soufflair.
One who makes souffles.
I know. You know
Exactly.
what? I'm okay with that, because then I'm a master chef. I'm okay with that
That's a
change.
good alt. That should be your alt.
That
Also,
is.
I will
Not to steal it.
transfer, what's a fair amount? 500 shadow crystals to the first forum troll that makes the Soufflair account.
Don't try. I will make that on the server before this goes live. I will steal that one.
You'd better do it. Although, I don't know how seriously our listeners take these challenges because I tried to get them to convince Lewis to post a monocle picture of himself, and that didn't happen. So, I don't know.
There was a hurricane that came through and
Well, okay.
Monocle away.
went away. He lost his monocle.
He lost the monocle. That's what it was.
Just cut out the bottom of a Coke bottle and jab it in. It'll stay.
I'm not
You
maiming
talking
myself.
to your wife there?
Wow, this
Wow.
episode
This
got
episode
so
is
dirty
off to
so
a great
fast.
All right,
start.
let's bring it back in. Trevor, you haven't been on yet, and so the listeners may not know too much about you. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do on the Woven design team?
Alrighty, so basically I'm the overall balance guy of the design team. Yeah, that's right, balance guy. Fancy title. And pretty much it's my job to make sure that the cards are as close to the middle as possible. So that means not too strong, but also not too weak. You want the happy middle, where everything is tranquil and peaceful, and everything comes together nicely. Yeah?
Yeah, seems pretty straightforward. So, next time you guys have a deck that you think is overpowered or a card that is just way too weak, now you know who to forward your complaints to.
Yep. You forward them to Ninja Ducky Seth.
That is not what I was going for
I
at all.
second that notion completely.
I personally think you should forward everything, including but not limited to nude pictures of yourself, to Ninja Ducky /Seth.
I did that already.
See, I don't know if we should
Nice.
exclude the nude picture there, because I'm sure you're gonna see some interesting things.
I just don't like where this is going, so let's go ahead and dive into the
Oh,
topic.
penis. That's where this is going.
It's exactly going that direction.
Okay, so the first thing we want to talk about today is we've launched an official physical card store on shadowera.com. If you go to shadowera.com/store, you can now order the physical booster packs and physical product to be shipped internationally anywhere in the world so you can get your hands on the physical game, even if it's hard to find retailers and, stores that are carrying Shadow Era near you. You can still get some, start playing it with your friends, and maybe show it to some retail stores and see if they want to start carrying it. You can get some Shadow Era going in your area. That's at shadowera.com/store, and it's awesome, so you should check it out. So, let's talk about the spoiler that was released since the last episode. We've seen Twisted Familiar. For those of you who may not have seen it, let's run down Twisted Familiar real quick. He's a Shadow ally at 2 cost. He's got 1 attack and 3 health. His text is, opposing heroes or allies that deal ability damage to Twisted Familiar take 1 damage. He's also got, for 0 resources, an activated ability, Twisted Familiar is killed, and 2 used resources are renewed. So this is a pretty interesting card. It's not like anything we've had so far in Shadow Era, giving you a way to sort of pool up resources and save them for later, and giving you an ally to work with in the meantime. So what sort of design needs brought this guy about? How did we come to this guy?
We're looking at having 2-cost allies that on both sides that were not just good on turn 2, which everybody looks at 2-cost allies as, what do they do on turn 2 when you play them, but guys who also have a use late in the game other than being a cheap body. And in this case, he does have a bit of a use late in the game. He's pretty good against ability damage dealing heroes, Majaya, Banebow, heroes like that. It helps kind of kick them back for an extra 1. And that 2-resource pump is actually pretty good. I mean, we found that it works really well with Wrath of the Forest. That's particularly interesting. But, it's to find a 2-cost ally who has a bit more versatility late in the game than just, Brutalis, who's a 1/4 body.
Right. I always found that was true with the allies in the first set with Brutalis and with Puin. Early game, they were totally great, but once you got around to turn 7 or 8, they were just kind of mostly sacrifice fodder. They didn't have any use whatsoever. So this is an interesting departure from that.
Well, we also wanted to kind of go more towards the options section of things, where you could play an ally, and it didn't necessarily matter that he was a body, because he had other effects and hooks, like triggering with Olgoth and triggering with Wrath of the Forest, and all these abilities that he can pop off and still be a 2-drop body and still survive on his turn 2.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on turn 2, a 1/3 body is typically big enough to survive the 1 turn you ideally like. I mean, he still dies to Puin plus Alden, but most things will die to that. But even still, though, it's not a bad trade-off. I mean, I don't know if I would say he replaces a guy like Brutalis, which are a little bit bigger outright, but he's definitely an interesting option. And depending on which hero you're running, you could really get some nifty tricks with him. Heroes like Zaldar could benefit from the resource acceleration. Stuff like that's pretty useful. I mean, late in the game, it's definitely, like you said, great with Olgoth as well.
Yeah, to chime in on that, I definitely got to say this is the kind of card where there's a lot of potential for it, like going forward, like not just now, right? It's not like it's at its best, say, just by looking at it, taking it on its own. You have to kind of compare it to all the new stuff that's going to come out and the stuff we have now that'll synergize with such an effect, because it's kind of interesting, right? Like you said, with Wrath of the Forest, you can kind of make a deck around that. You sack this guy, it triggers Wrath of the Forest. Maybe you play like a Shadow Knight. You bring him back. You use those 2 resources to play him again if you have like 7 resources, we'll say. It's got like a lot of combo potential.
I like to see the threads like this where when we spoil him, half of the players are going, oh my god, this guy's great. He's going to be so good in all these decks. And the other half of the players are like, what? I don't even see a use for this guy. You guys are all crazy. Because that tells me that we have an interesting card where he's good in some situations and not necessarily required for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. That plays back to its synergy and combo potential, right? Like, if you just look at the card, you might not realize at first glance, oh, I could use it in this certain way. So as you try out a card like this or think about it more, you'll find things that you didn't know were there at first.
Absolutely. And that's going to drive it to be a lot of fun.
Unless we spoil them all in the podcast.
That's true.
There are
True.
cards
Could
that
do
we
that.
won't talk about, so yeah.
That's true. There's still a lot of cards unspoiled from the set. Dun dun dun. All right, so let's move on and talk about the tournament season that is now underway. We've been talking about this the last couple of episodes in the podcast. Our first set of regional tournaments is off and running. Gondorian, you want to talk a little bit about that? How far are they along and how have they been going so far?
Yeah, sure. Just a brief recap for people that don't know. World Championships 2013 is going to take place next summer. There's 16 invites to this exclusive event, and people will earn them in various ways. The first 3 invites are going to be earned via these regional qualifiers that are running at the moment. There's between 50 to 54 people in each one, and we're currently on round 2. Each round lasts about 4 days. I'm really impressed with the players arranging their games with each other and getting them done, reporting them properly, and sending their deck lists. They're big props to the players that have done all of that correctly. It makes it run a whole lot better. So, In terms of gameplay, I think maybe we'll hand over to somebody else who's had time to look into the results so far. So over to
Kevin, you've been kind of checking out and keeping tabs on how everything's been going. Why don't you give us what's the meta been looking like? What have players been bringing to this new sideboard format that everyone's all excited about?
Well, obviously, I don't want to go into too depth of detail because it's kind of to the players to try and figure each other out. But I will say that a lot of what we're seeing are the DD heroes, the direct damage heroes like Eladwin and Nishaven, Banebow. They're rocking it. Currently, we've got multiple Eladwins, a Nishaven or two, multiple Zaladars, and even a Banebow has made it completely undefeated as of the time of this recording.
Which I find particularly impressive, actually. I would not have expected a Banebow to be undefeated with going a few rounds in.
That's funny, actually. I actually am surprised that there's not more Banebow. Because Banebow is one of those heroes that he does have some weak matchups, but if you played particularly skilled, he can make up for his matchups really well. I mean, maybe I'm talking about, one of the pro top tier Banebows. I mean, Sisyphus is always just a maestro with his Banebow. So I commend him for that. I mean, I've never seen anybody who can work it like him. But I'm really.
So
I'm getting mental images right now that are just not appropriate.
Sorry.
We're gonna move on, Gondorian. But I heard that. But no, I mean, I was actually surprised at how many of the direct damage heroes are. There's a lot of them, which I thought was really interesting because I actually expected a lot of priests. Actually, I expect a lot of priests, figuring that they'd be able to tech better than most of the heroes, and they already have very few bad matchups, so that they can really kind of cover a lot of ground.
Well, and that's kind of what's caught me as well, is we saw from the World Championships 2012 that a lot of mages started it off and then were quickly filtered through because of the sheer number of warriors that were there. And now we're seeing the direct damage heroes are plethoric. I would have feared that people would have gone more towards the warriors and thus the priests as the hard counters. And more than I figured that your number one thing you'd be seeing right now would be warriors. I figured that would be what people were bringing because of how well they did at Worlds. Then quite a few priests, because priests are the hard counter to warrior, and because they've done a fantastic job. They've won Worlds. But then I was also expecting a lot of lances and rogues and things like that to kind of flush it out, because those are heroes who are incredibly powerful when you tech. For instance, rogues and hunters both have the access to the Spillator bands, which shuts a mage down for a certain number of turns. Well, with a sideboard, you can carry those cards in your sideboard without having to waste your precious deck space, and then just put them in for your extra 2 victories. So I'm personally really shocked that we're not seeing more of that. As Gondorian said before our meeting, it's more like people are bringing a lot of rocks to this and forgetting about paper and scissors.
There's a reasonable number of Serenas in the Americas one. Anyway, there's 6 Serenas in there. Not many Lance. There's 3 Serena in the Asia one, and only 1 Serena in Europe. Just deriving these stats while we speak. And Lance, there's a lot of Lance in Europe. There's a lot of love for Lance. So Europe, they like the rogue guy, but Americans seem to like the rogue lady. Don't read too much into that.
I'm trying to think of some kind of pop culture reference, and James Bond definitely comes to mind.
Yeah, 007, yeah. Basically, though, rogues are in all of them. I think there's about 8 rogues in each regional.
I'm actually kind of surprised that we didn't see one region that was just all Zaladars all the way up and down, because one thing that is very interesting if you are around a lot of the top level players is that they have this Zaladar's always known as a very, very versatile hero, and people always talk about how, you could build him for anything if you just could use all of his cards. You could tech for any situation. And so with the sideboards, I thought people were just going to go crazy and everyone was going to play Zaladar because then you could tech for anything. But that's not really what happened. There's a decent number of Zaladars present, but he's not overwhelming in the meta at all.
Well, he's not overwhelming in his presence, but he is holding a solid place. I'm looking at the undefeated chart so far, and he has over 5 people that he's carried to an undefeated. Well, I don't want to say that because it sounds like the players haven't done their share of the work, but he's definitely making his presence known.
True enough. And he is a good hero.
He was my hero back in the day.
Yes, I completely agree here. It's funny because I'm looking at the list, and there's definitely some players that I'm looking forward to seeing how they do. And Surprisingly, a lot of them are actually using Zaldar, but some of my main ones I'm looking at actually aren't. So it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how some of these top tier players really do with heroes that they're not particularly known for very much.
Hey, to be honest, what I'm keeping my eyes on is the fact we have 2 undefeated Nishavens right now. That impresses me. I want to see how far that guy's going to go, because he's definitely not the kind of hero you're thinking is going to get played. You're thinking, mage, human, well, Ladwin. Why ever Nishaven? So I want to see if these guys can kind of show us something that we're not seeing yet.
They predicted the weenie rush, I guess. They're thinking if somebody's got a loaded board on turn 5, explode it, and then maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to reveal their decks, but maybe that's what they were thinking of,
I
or
don't.
Portal,
Solid.
Nishaven.
Solid.
Perhaps, I mean, they might be thinking, building an anti-mage deck with just, tons of sandworms, which can survive Nishaven's ability anyways. I mean, just teching that way. And if they go across a deck where they need to be faster, then they can just sideboard in a lot more 3-cost allies for the worms and just, speed it up a bit and use his ability as a bit of an escape clause.
That's definitely true. I'm also kind of thinking that the reason that we see so much direct damage is simply because the sideboard format, right? It's not well known yet. People don't have their sideboards built. They're only exploring them for the first time now, so they probably say to themselves, what's a safe hero I can bring? It's relatively easy to play and is probably going to get me some, we'll say, like, easier wins than, like, playing a more complicated hero with a complicated sideboard. You go, hey,
More straightforward.
yeah, I'll play Zaladar. Like, hey, I'll play Aladwin. I just point and shoot, whatever.
Trevor, that's a really good point, because we're all talking about, we expected certain things from the sideboards, but then again, everyone here, because we do play physical, we've been with sideboards before. We've been in multiple games and tournaments and with each other where we've used sideboards. So our line of thinking, we've already seen kind of where the sideboard game kind of evolves to, and now we're seeing where it evolved from for the first time.
I'm curious, what would you guys bring to an event like this, knowing that you have sideboards now for the first time and you're able to really kind of tech against certain matchups? What heroes would you bring? What kind of strategies would you use?
On the latter quick match, I've been known to play a lot of Lance, right? And in my Lance builds, I typically decide to go, let's say 2 Spell Eater Bands in the main deck, 2 Sever Ties in the main deck, and it's because I'm trying to combat multiple matchups. And now that I have sideboards, you know what? Those Sever Ties, those Spell Eater Bands, I'm probably putting like an easy 3-4 copies all on the sideboard and only siding them in when they're relevant. It's a big difference from what it is without sideboards.
Absolutely. It's funny because I've actually been on the receiving end of that, Lance. Because there was a time, not this ladder reset, but the time before that, where I was climbing and I was like, I don't know, like 330 something. And I came across you and I was like, oh wow, Majumbo's up here. You were like a hair below me. I mean, it doesn't matter. But we were there, and I was like, awesome. He's playing a Lance, I'm playing Amber. It's got a tough matchup anyways, but I think I got a shot. And it was neck and neck, it was getting down to the wire, and at the last minute, out of nowhere, he pulled the Sever Ties on me.
You know what? It's funny because I remember that game.
You do, see? And all I can think is, why do you have that?
For me, it would be a really tough toss-up between Zaladar or Lance. On one hand, like Trevor was saying, Lance is extremely flexible. I can now pull my Severed Ties, pull my Spell Eater Bands, put them in my sideboard, pull out my Kurtz, put in some other thing, and don't have to tech so hard against everything. Bring a more generic, streamlined version, and then in my sideboard, carry my hard counters and just remember what to shuffle in and who to shuffle it in against. On the flip side of that, Zaladar, as we've said, he's a great hero. His only problem is on occasionally he needs certain cards that you can't normally carry. I can afford to carry those extra cards now. So for me, it'd be a really tough toss-up. I'd probably lean more towards Lance, though, because I've been practicing with him more, playing my wife with the physical game.
For me, I can say that the first time I encountered a sideboard tournament with the physical game, I may normally play a little bit of mage heroes. I think that's the rumor anyway. And when picking up Magia, there were 2 cards I was really focused on my sideboard, Freezing Grip and Acid Jet, because those are 2 cards that I always wanted to have in my decks, but I could never quite justify the space to have them in because they weren't always good. And I ended up finding that putting them in gave me so much more versatility in the matchups where I was a lot of times down for various reasons in my Portal Magia deck. It was awesome. And that's what I would do again if I were faced with this situation with the regionals for the first time.
Nice. I will say that just as a small slight, we both know you don't carry Nova. We both know.
I think I
True
think
You'd sideboard that out.
that's
You
just
would.
not that's scarred. That scars me. Scars me, Lewis. I can't believe you just did that.
This is why you have me here for moments exactly like that.
I'm crying one tear right now.
One tear.
One single tear down my cheek.
Just one. Just one. We all heard it right here. Fireballs do cry. Fireballs do cry. They have feelings too.
The tear is a fireball rolling down the side of my cheek.
Oh yay! Way to go! I want to see a meme about that. Just crying fireballs.
Crying fireballs.
Yeah, I want to see a meme about that now. That should be your intro. This is Ninja Ducky crying fireballs.
When Ninja Ducky doesn't draw supernova, he cries fireballs.
Exactly.
I don't always cry, but when I
You
do.
See, awesome reference right there. But I don't know about you guys, but for me, if I had to, I'm actually kind of torn, just like Kevin is. I'm torn between two heroes neither of you mentioned, Victor and Zana. Because Victor has very few bad matchups. He's a little slow, but he has very few bad matchups. And if you play him really well, he can do some serious damage. I mean, I know Kevin can attest to at Gen Con, I was running a Victor that I had built with Sandworms and Surprise Attack, which is actually hilariously annoying. Because Sandworms last so long on the board that you just draw so many cards from them. But, stuff like that's definitely kind of stuff that I would think to build around. And now that you have sideboards, you can either sideboard in more arrows if you need them, or, your Sever Ties or anything to slow down, the speedy warriors. So I would definitely think about that. I mean, the only thing that might put me off of Victor is the Moonstalker matchup, whereas his ability does help him get around the hiding, but the potential of Millstalker is a bit hard for him to get around, especially if it's a good Millstalker. But he's definitely one of the two I would consider. And Zana, I'm the priest guy. You had to have expected that. Zana's very, very few bad matchups. I've heard Jackie say that Zana's the only T1 hero. Where
I've heard that too.
Yeah, has no terrible matchups that aren't great, and has so many answers in her card pool that same problem as Zaladar, where she has answers to everything, but you can't play your answers to everything in the same deck. So you just kind of sideboard in, Ice Storm and Smite, against, speedy rush decks, and you can just sideboard those in to kind of as an answer to that, or you can sideboard in, Bad Santas against rogues, who are not going to let you keep your Wisdom Staff on the board, stuff like that. So I would definitely consider that. And with Zana, you don't have to worry about the Millstalker matchup, because you could just get around that really easily. So that would be my logic. Gandori, what about you?
Okay, I've been playing a lot of Gravebone recently on an alt account, and I've really been enjoying it. And I tend to beat mages quite a lot, especially Majaya, Aladwin. So I think maybe actually Gravebone might have been a good call for this, because you can in the sideboard, rather than bringing say tech cards like counters, I might have swapped Weenies for Fatties, for example, depending on who I've ended up facing. So I really like the Voice of Winter combo with Gravebone. Yeah, I would have brought Gravebone just because I've been playing him a whole lot and enjoying it as well. So I'll be interested to see how other Gravebones do. There aren't many, but he's pretty good against Xana actually.
Yeah.
I've faced quite a few Xanas, and you put down a PB and then she does a tidal wave. Well, you bring him back the next turn with Gravebone ability. So I think he's a decent hero. We should see more of him.
Sounds like a good deck on paper.
Definitely.
It works. It works. I've won quite a lot of games with it.
Although I will say the Voice of Winter combo is a little slow. It's a good combo. It's just a little bit slow getting it off, though.
That's exactly the kind of thing you can side in and out, right? If you can go from a fast deck to a slow deck. It's adaptive.
I completely agree. For a long time, I was playing with a Gravebone Voice of Winter deck whose only weakness was if the meta shifted towards much faster decks, it couldn't keep up because it was very late game oriented. But in a late game oriented environment, it was really, really strong. So in a sideboard format, that would not be a bad choice at all, I think.
I would probably have started off with with weenies in the deck, in the main deck, because you expect a lot of rush decks. And then, depending on whether you face one or not, then I would have sided out some of those weenies and brought in fatter ones. I did get annihilated by a lance yesterday. Just too fast for me. Killed me by turn 5, I think so.
Oh wow.
It was just horrible. He went first and he played Chris and Nightshade and Birgit and Aldon and just boom. Or something like that. It was horrible anyway. My Gravebone didn't have any 2cc allies, so.
So if I can just go back in time a little bit, I think that everyone will get a little giggle out of this. We're looking at Gravebone, and he's barely in this tournament. He doesn't seem to be like progressing super fast. He's not really a pick to win. Does anyone else remember back when we first released this version of Shadow, back when the first set was finalized and complete, everyone screaming that Gravebone was tier 0?
Yes.
I recall.
Yes.
In fact, I will actually do you one better. I remember earlier than that, where people were screaming that Banebo was not only was he T0, but he had no reason to run weenies anymore. He would just run a slew of heavies and burn to last him until he can cast them, and that he would just pound you with Minotaurs and Behemoths and Ogloth and just keep casting them, knowing that you can't kill every one of them because he can bring them back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
-1, I think some people said even.
Yeah,
Tier -2.
tier 0 and the -1 terms of alcohol.
If tier 0 is so broken, there's no reason to play anything else. What is tier -1? I mean, does that mean you like wig out like that guy in the YouTube video just when you see Gravebone being played? You just wig out, flip the table, walk away.
Flip the table, baby.
Yep, flip the table. That's what I do every time I see Banebo.
Oh yeah, sure. Tables will be flipped.
All right, so let's keep it moving right along. We have a lot of listener questions, and we want to make sure we get to all of them because we love you guys out there listening to us, and we want to talk about the things that you want to hear about. So let's get it started with a question from Adam Zed. He wanted to see a design team breakdown of the current World Championship qualifier rounds, like which heroes have been seen and how sideboards have impacted the games and the hero choices. Just rewind about however many minutes it's going to be and listen through. That's the answer to that question. Next up, we have Tidwell, who had several questions, and because we're so generous and awesome, we're going to cover all of them. First up, he wants to know, how does the expansion's increased focus on damage types, such as lightning, fire, etc., impact the allies and abilities in the base set, the kind that only have physical damage and no elemental type? Do you think they're going to be more powerful or less powerful? I'm interested to hear in the design pitfalls and challenges of making a damage type matters central mechanic. Lewis, why don't you tell us about that?
Okay. Well, I definitely think that it's going to be an alternate choice for players, and I think it's a choice most players are going to want to choose because it allows for deck theming where you can have, a fire damage based deck or a lightning damage based deck, or I mean, you may or may not, depending upon the cards in the expansion, be able to build a full deck themed around them. But it's definitely something that going forward is going to be allow people to theme their decks in different ways, and it's going to allow more creativity on people's parts, building frost decks or just heavy fire decks or whatever it is. So that's definitely something I think is a good thing, and I think a lot of people are going to really try and take advantage of. Now, as far as design pitfalls, I will say that it is a little bit tricky because the elements do interact really uniquely, as in like some of the fire creatures may or may not have issues with ice, like you saw with I believe Fury and Terror was spoiled and he dies immediately to ice damage. So stuff like that, makes for interesting balance issues and interesting power level issues of should they be more powerful because they're weak to ice, or should they be less powerful because it's only ice that they're weak to and they have so much synergy with other fire stuff. So it definitely is really interesting going forward to design with these elemental damage types in mind, and especially with the forethought, thinking 2 and 3 and 4 sets ahead, where you really have to think about what directions you want to go with stuff. So I think it's a little bit of a tricky, but I don't think it's that bad. I think it's doable.
I think one of the things that's interesting about, if you look at the way that Shadow Era is designed, and whenever we have the second set come out, you'll be actually able to see and compare how the game evolves from one set to the next, is that we roll out these new mechanics relatively slowly compared to other games, and that helps to alleviate the pitfalls and challenges because we can actually see how these mechanics begin to take hold in the metagame and in the player base, and then we can, as the mechanic continues to expand, design around it.
I wouldn't say it's a central mechanic. I mean, that's in the question. Well, I don't think we've made it central. It's more just it's been highlighted in the spoilers so far. People have noticed it, but I wouldn't say it's a central mechanic. There's a lot more other great juicy stuff to come that would
And
be
That
more
is also
termed
true.
central mechanics.
And I would definitely say it's more of an option. For instance, we don't want to make it where you could take your old deck and now it's completely useless. You'll never be able to win a game with it against someone that has the expansion. We definitely want to make it where cards are all balanced. Like Trevor was saying earlier, a card should not be more powerful in this. It should all be this nice balanced flow. So by giving the cards those kinds of damage types, we're actually allowing you to have more choices without really fluctuating the balance. Because now, if we release another Puin that does lightning type damage instead of physical damage, well, they're the same power, the same thing, that they have different options behind them that may make one better in certain circumstances than the other.
I agree
Oh,
completely.
Exactly.
Oh, absolutely. Because to further the example, like one Poon with ice damage or one Poon without. Poon with ice damage synergizes with ice abilities, but he's also weak to whatever fire, perhaps, or he has whatever
Exactly.
pitfall, or weak to stuff that reduces ice damage. Whereas the generic Poon with no damage type, other than swinging a sword at their faces, he doesn't have that pitfall. It's definitely not adding a card that is the same card but strictly better, just completely outmoding older cards. You want them to be able to work with them so you can build around both of them.
And that's one of the interesting things when you're talking about designing a damage type matters mechanic. It's not that difficult to keep the straight physical damage balanced in the game because people have a lot of these bonuses and defenses that they get to all the elemental stuff. Sometimes just being able to cut through all of that and ignore it is a powerful metagame choice, just the same way that picking fire or ice or electric damage would be.
I'd just like to add the other reason why we're making use of these different damage types, it makes the story richer. I mean, in terms of flavor of the cards, we can tell a much richer story. Some people really get into that. They love when they're playing the game that their allies and hero, they're kind of telling a story of a battle. So having the option to go with somebody who's a master of ice or fire because they've got something in their backstory about that, that's a chance really to bring more of the story into the game. So that's another reason that I like these things.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of add on to what Kevin said. Definitely with the elemental types in terms of like from a balance perspective, what you basically get is this interesting scenario where you've got, say I make my fire deck. So I have my Majaya fire deck and it's all about fire damage. It ends up being, we can say, like really strong in of itself because it has all this fire buffing generating and it works synergistically well. But then at the same time you've got, say, ice immunities or things that reduce fire damage or reduce elemental damage, and all that kind of brings the power level right back down. So you've got like this interesting kind of threshold of balance there.
And it works.
Exactly.
Based on testing so far, it's working.
Yeah,
Can't give
it's
any more
working
clues
really.
away.
It's working really nicely. I would say so.
All right, so the next question up, I would love to hear more about the development process behind Meltdown and any possible ideas that have been kicked around to enhance the experience.
Having people play it on fire?
That would be that. I don't know if that would enhance
Yes.
the experience for the players, but as a spectator sport, I think that would be a very interesting
watch
twist
it.
we could add.
I don't think I could look away from it, actually.
I would only watch it if I was the one allowed to set both of the players on fire, each with one of my two fireballs.
One of your
Yeah.
fireball tears.
Yes. Or you could
Yes.
go hit the Hitchcock route, and you have like both players have like a device under their chair, and they have to play fast before one of them explodes. Like all of a sudden, tense matches with
Sounds
real life
dangerous.
consequences.
And all these ideas have been kicked around actually. And
Yes,
Kyle,
we've had
Kyle's
we've had
thinking of-
And Kyle has said that I feel like Kyle's considered them more strongly than the webcam physical game
Yeah, safe to say.
thing
Yeah,
that I've
probably.
been trying to get. So I mean, there's that. So that it's there's things in the pipeline coming down.
In terms of the development process, I assume Tidwell's talking about where did the idea come from? Because we covered that
Yeah.
before with Kyle just made it up, I think.
Yeah,
At
that was,
Origins.
at Origins, it was
Just
Kyle's
thought,
idea.
hey, let's have a limited format. What about 4 packs? Throw them together. Because Kyle doesn't know the rules too well, so he he just threw he just he just opened 4 packs and just mashed them together, and that was it
Sure,
really.
leave it to Kyle to pull that one out. Leave it to Kyle to pull that one out.
Let's call that a eureka moment. He just kind of went,
Josh,
voila!
of course, he's like, this is too complicated. Let's just open 4 packs and stick them together.
Yes,
See what happens.
Kyle played Todd waving his Zeldar. He's like, why not? I am Kyle, Lord of Shadowware. Why not?
And it worked, and it was actually insanely fun,
Oh,
and
yeah.
became super popular.
Because as I recall, it was his idea, and I believe we played the first Meltdown, I think the last day of Origins, I think. We had something like 8 people sitting down playing it. It was a 4-pack, 8-man, and it was just an insane amount of fun. I mean, insane combos, and just, yeah, it was an instant hit since then.
So that's another thing, talking about like our design philosophy behind it is I think everyone here plays Meltdown. I know I play it fairly often, and my wife plays it more than is probably healthy for our relationship.
See, Meltdown is too stressful for me, because I can't tell you how many times I play Meltdown. All I can say is, don't have what big teeth, don't have what big teeth, don't have what big teeth. And then they play it, and like, haha, shriek. And like, what? I had a second one. Like, oh, doomed.
Amber Teeth deck to the face.
Amber
Yes.
Teeth is the best deck ever.
It's-
I love Amber Teeth.
I know,
Just because you
Anorak's
get to call it Amber Teeth. I mean, come on.
All right, so moving right along to the last Tidwell question. Do we have any insight into the future economy of the game? What kind of things would you guys like to see to make the game's economy evolve? We actually have a lot of ideas that we can't talk about very much just yet, but there's things coming down the pipeline where we're going to be evolving the game's economy by giving more opportunities to both earn the in-game currencies and to spend it. So there'll be a lot more. There won't be so much stockpiling of gold and crystals and things that you earn in the game. You'll actually be getting those things and then investing them into new game types and new cards and all these sorts of things. Limited formats, for example, there's much more than just Meltdown coming down the pipeline, but we can't really talk about that too much yet because it's not out. So keep your eyes on the ShadowEra.com forums and keep listening to the podcast, and eventually you may pick up little hints and tidbits of some of that stuff to come.
I do want to chime in, though, that there was once a point in time where I believe the forum name was Nerd for Christ, where had something like 1.5 million gold, where I nicknamed him
Yes.
Moneybags for that exact reason. It's going to be sad to see stuff like that go, where people are just going to be investing all that in all sorts of alternative ways of playing the game. So
Yeah, it'll be very sad when people can earn like 300 million gold and then have to spend it
I
on
know,
stuff.
right?
Man,
It's terrible.
that's so unfair.
How dare we? How dare we?
absolutely.
Oh,
All right, so moving right along for time's sake, Nate the Great wanted to know, will the expansion change the starter decks? Gondorian, would you like to take a crack at this one?
Nope. And that's both the answer and no, actually, yeah. I'll answer it with the answer nope. No, the starter decks won't change because they haven't even changed since the some of the Call of the Crystals cards came out. Actually, a lot of players, they kind of rely on certain cards being in them, and they buy them and sell them for gold and so on. So no, the expansion will only be available in booster packs, and then I guess the auction house when that comes online. So starter decks stay the same. There's no new heroes in the expansion. We've confirmed
Now,
that.
see, remember Tidwell, when I said if you kept listening to the podcast, you would hear hints about things coming in the future related to the economy? If you're still listening, you just heard one.
I want to point out Nate the Great does have an awesome name.
he
I just
does.
want to point out that
He's-
if Tidwell does, we just told Tidwell, if you didn't rage quit our podcast, we gave you what you asked for.
Turns it off after his questions. Good.
What? Only answer 2 questions? Headset smash!
We answered 3.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you
answered
very much.
3, man. Come on.
See, this is why Kevin is the story guy.
Not the maths guy, no.
The math.
Numbers too big.
I am not going to take that bait.
Next up, we have Books, who informed me that I pronounced his name correctly on a podcast the first time I ever said it, which I think is actually a first for me ever on any podcast, pronouncing something correctly the first time. So I'm kind of proud of that. But Books would like to know if we can release some information about the most used cards and heroes during the last season, and also some of the least used cards, because he thinks it'd be interesting to have statistics from last season. The answer to that is no, we can't, because we're a little bit concerned that it might hurt people's experimentations or the metagame in general if we say, hey, here's a card that was not very popular, here's a deck that got used a ton at high ratings, then that might skew people away from experimenting with certain things, or deck types may end up not getting discovered because people go, oh, I don't need to bother with hero X because hero A, all the top level players are playing him, so I'm just going to go and play that. So we don't want to do that because we don't think it would be that great for the metagame and all that, so we're keeping that information a secret.
It is.
Sorry.
It is interesting to have the statistics, though. We've got them. That's one of the perks of being on the design team. One of the few perks. So we can look at the statistics, and yeah, they are interesting. And it's interesting nobody's found the tier -3 Baduru deck yet, as well. Actually,
I know. I thought
Yeah,
they
you
announced
know,
that
we built
instant.
that thing in PFG. I showed it to you guys. That's the reason you guys brought me onto the design team, was that one Bataroo deck. And
I remember
seriously,
that.
I
See?
can't believe no one else has
See?
discovered it.
So if I could just get this straight, you made such an amazing deck and demonstrated your gameplay skills to such an extent that you were hired to write the story?
I was actually hired to the design team, but they asked me to stay on the story just because, well, basically what happened is they wanted to put me under non-disclosure agreement. And I'm pretty sure my deck list is under that disclosure agreement. I'm not allowed to use it. I'm not allowed to send it. And the only job that no one else was doing was they stuck me on the story because they figured, he can't even screw that up. Wait till they read it.
Yes, you heard it here first, folks. Build a T -3 Baduru deck, and you get a good shot at getting hired. Just saying.
And shoved into the niche role no one else wanted.
Yes, I'm sure we could find a garbage time role. Worse than Kevin's supposed story writing.
Because I'm horribly abused in my position.
In case you can't tell, we absolutely love Kevin.
We do.
No Kevins were harmed in the making of this podcast.
Yet. Alright, so next question up, we've got Direwolven. I'm not sure if this only appears in iOS, but the current challenge screen layout is a little untidy. Are there any plans to rectify this? The answer is yes. We have UI changes in the pipeline. They're being worked on over in the development team's offices in their secret lair where they work on such things, and they should be coming sometime relatively soon. A lot of things are getting revamped, and we're aware of a lot of those issues. So if you hold tight, the fixes are coming.
So if anyone is curious about the dev team, the secret programmers, there's actually kind of a cool story with those. The entire idea of Wolven is that all the dev teams are actually werewolves who only turn into wolves on full moon, typical, but Kyle only lets them out of the office once a month, and that's why they're only Wolven.
Yeah, I will say though that I'm pretty sure that they live in the Batcave, or work there at least. It only makes sense.
Could be. Now, the next question we have up, just to keep things moving right along because we're starting to go a little long here. Okay, I'm going to try to pronounce this. J. Dambros. I hope that's right. If not, you can send me a PM chastising me. Are there any plans to update the game's graphics and user interface? As someone who plays and streams Shadow Era in 720p, the game can get quite ugly sometimes. Now, reading this question, I think what I kind of want to direct you to, Jade Ambrose, is there is a downloadable standalone client for the game that can actually run in higher resolutions. So if you're trying to do something like stream a game on Twitch TV or something like that, rather than maximizing and full screening the web version, download the standalone client and have it run in a higher resolution, and that will make it look much prettier for you, and it won't you won't have that sort of warped resolution, the stretching or the pixelating that can sometimes come when you full screen the web version. Next question we have up, Pandemonium would like to know how Dimension Ripper and Transference work in physical play. Do we show half of the card for 1 second, or you don't show it all, or what? Mojumbo, what is the ruling on this?
Oh, that's a simple one, really. When you draw the card, you just don't show it. Sometimes in a digital game, you will see it with certain cards, but that's more or less a bug. In the physical game, you don't show it. You just draw the card as normal.
Bam. Nice and simple. All right, guys, so that's about it for this week's episode. And I want you to know that this time, I actually did remember to go over the contest entries for how we should end the podcast with all the design team. And we do have a winner. Congratulations to Alzarath. Your entry is how we are going to end this podcast from now on. So, without further ado, thanks for tuning into Shadow Era Radio, where the drinks are cold, the snakes are hot, and the O penis is never censored.